delicious. Smithers, every year you outstrip yourself in succulence.
Oh, thank you, sir. Oh, would you like some candied yams?
Oh, no, I couldn't eat another bite. Dispose of all this.
Hello, and welcome to the Simpsons Countdown, the podcast where we go back to the beginning and watch all of The Simpsons to trace the creative evolution of the series and count down, finding the exact moment in which it began its inevitable decline. I'm your host, Erix Antoine, and this week I'm joined by Troy Anderson of AndersonVision.com, and just an all-around clever, knowledgeable, and opinionated man with a good head on his shoulders. We'll be discussing the episode Bart vs. Thanksgiving, which originally aired on November 22nd, 1990, which was in fact Thanksgiving of that year. In this episode, Bart destroys Lisa's centerpiece, which she worked really hard on to display on the dinner table. Bart is sent to his room without supper as punishment, but he sneaks out of the house and ends up having his Thanksgiving dinner at a homeless shelter. When he returns home, he finds a distraught Lisa. They have a moment of bonding, and he apologizes to her, and so the family sits down to enjoy a late-night meal of leftovers. It's a heartwarming, sentimental episode, structured not unlike a traditional holiday special, but of course with enough of a dose of the customary Simpsons cynicism to keep things on edge. Troy and I are about to break it down for you with a typical all-over-the-place discussion. So without further ado, here we go. So welcome, Troy. How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm here to talk about The Simpsons.
Well, that's why I called you here, and I'm glad you're here. And you chose this episode when I gave you a handful of episodes, and this is one of the ones that you kind of pointed out that you'd want to talk about.
Exactly.
And I was kind of wondering why that is, like why this is among the episodes that you selected, Bart versus Thanksgiving. Why this is the one that kind of jumped out at you.
Well, this is the first episode that George Meyer wrote solo. I'm a big George Meyer fan. I mean, a lot of people remember him from his time in SNL, when most of the SNL staff actually hated his guts because he was too weird. Even like when he was on The Simpsons, that first like couple of scripts, because he also helped co-write The Crepes of Wrath that was in season 1, and it was more weird French obscure art house jokes that no one really got.
That's an interesting point. I mean, now that you've mentioned it, one thing about Crepes of Wrath that's interesting is it's a rather complex. It's got a complex plot to it. There's a lot going on in that episode, and this one has a lot of complexity to it as well. But it feels like a holiday special. That's the thing that sort of jumps out at me at first. You know, it's a Thanksgiving themed episode, but the structure and the way the story is, it has this heartwarming story that's done kind of in the style of a holiday special.
Which is amazing. Yeah, it is. I rewatched it earlier just to keep my brain going. But yeah, I mean, he even admits, because people have interviewed George Meyer before, he's like, yeah, it turned out way, way more normal than I ever thought I could write something. Because people forget, but he was part of Lorne Michaels' crew after Lorne Michaels left. He was trying to make the new show, which was like a really lame knockoff of SNL that aired when SCTV wasn't on. And he was stuck in a room because Lorne Michaels couldn't figure out how to deal with him. All the writers hated him. So Lorne Michaels put George Meyer and they put Jack Handey in a room together. And they just got so weird together that eventually Jack Handey like mellowed out, because he started getting a little more obscure and people didn't think he was a real person. And they just told George Meyer to hit the bricks. Because, I mean, before Crepes of Wrath, I think George Meyer was out of work for like a year and a half. Well, actually, outside of Army Man, which Army Man's a whole other issue to get into.
And the part where he said that it turned out a lot less weird than he thought.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I follow a lot of the Simpsons writers throughout time and everything, and he thought playing up more like the homeless element and like not being preachy about it, but just dwelling on how shitty it was, and like having an air like, you know, they're in holiday time on a major network and in a cartoon. I mean, people got to remember, like 1990, 91 to now. I mean, just huge difference in terms of how things were culturally perceived. And it was the third highest rated show that week. I mean, nobody batted an eye at it, and he was just like, "Huh," you know. He goes, "I thought it was being shocking. Apparently, no one gave a shit."
Well, I mean, that's a good point because I mean, you're right. There is a certain, even though it's done in the style of a traditional holiday special, right? There is a certain cynicism that's there. It's definitely there, and it's the kind of cynical, I guess, edgy is the word, humor that The Simpsons will become famous for. That you really see it in this episode. You see bits and pieces of it. In particular, the things you brought up, like the whole thing at the homeless shelter. That's a big part of the episode, and that is kind of a dark part of it. But I mean, yeah, there's like that whole thing. Ken Brockman is there, and the way he talks about them, like that's very funny, but it's also very dark.
Oh, we have lots of names for these people. Bums, deadbeats, losers, scums of the earth. We'd like to sweep these people into the gutter, or if they're already in the gutter, to some other out-of-the-way place. Oh, we have our reasons. They're depressing, they wear ragged clothes, they're crazy, they smell bad.
Hey, listen, man.
Wait, I'm going somewhere with this.
It's very truthful in its observation of how cynical it all is. All these reports we see about these human interest stories are ultimately just self-serving horseshit. And that's what this is pointing out, which I think is interesting. It's a key thing. And there's another thing that that whole sequence at the retirement home is darkly funny. I mean, darkly funny, but it's also kind of heartbreaking. And it seems to continue a bit of a trend. I don't know if this is a George Meyer thing or just a Simpsons thing, because in Bart the General, when the retirement home was first introduced, that's also the way it portrays that as a very kind of dark, depressing place. And then that's taken up a notch in this episode. That whole sequence when Homer goes to pick up Grandpa Simpson.
Before we sit down to our delicious turkey puree, I have some happy news. The following people have relatives who wish they could be here today. Antonoski, Conroy, Falcone, Martin, Thorson, and Walsh. Oh, and Mrs. Spencer, you too.
Oh, I knew they wouldn't forget me.
It's very darkly funny, but also very deeply sad. And for them to balance those tones as well as they do, I think that's commendable. That's one of the things I like about this episode, about The Simpsons in general, but about this episode in particular.
But I was thinking about when you said Bart the General, I'm like, yeah, that was the first appearance of the old people's home. There's something Palace. I'm sorry, I don't remember my Bart's versus the Space Mutants video game that well. I just remember how to jump on like orange things outside of there.
That's right, yeah. In the first level, yes.
Yeah, but
yes.
You're bringing up. I was looking. I go, who wrote that episode? I'm like, John Swartzwelder,
yes.
who also was the co-editor and one of the main writers with George Meyer at Army Man, the magazine he started after he got shit canned at SNL and before he got on The Simpsons. But here's the thing. Army Man, which I'm going to bring up because it only lasted 3 issues, but is like the most influential like comedy. It's almost like a fanzine. It's a newsletter. It only lasted 3 issues, and it took almost a year and a half to come out, all 3 issues. But here's a list. I want people that we'll start with the Simpsons nerds. So the main 3 writers were George Meyer, John Swartzwelder, who pretty much created Grandpa, all the older people, all that shit. I mean, he was one of the most prolific writers. John Vitti, who was one of the main writers on the movie. Put it all together. And Sam Simon, who co-created The Simpsons, was the guy who read magazines like, hey, I should bring all these guys in. But here's also other writers: Jeff Martin, David Sachs, Ian Maxson Grome, Tom Gamble, Max Pross, Kevin Curran, Billy Campbell. All these guys, literally the entire writing staff became Simpsons writers.
About this thing, I don't know much about Army Man. Does this predate National Lampoon?
No, Army Man came out in like 88 and lasted like to about, I'd say, the end of season 1 of The Simpsons.
Oh, okay. So it was like concurrent. Like it was around the same time as, because that's what I understand. Some of these writers, they came from places like that, but they were already working, I think, on Tracy Ullman and like a couple of other, like they were there. They were involved in the area, weren't they? I mean, some of them.
Not all of them. No, most Army Man writers didn't come into like season 1. lot of the Tracy Ullman stuff was Matt Groening and people of his ilk and Sam Simon, and they all were like, we have the tone, we don't have a voice. And so they started bringing a lot of people who, I mean, would end up becoming the showrunners like for the first 10 years were off of Army Man.
And you were talking, this is like 3 issues.
That's issues. People
right.
were climbing over each other to write for it because everyone loved it. Like it was like, it was the Bible among like comedians at the time. They've reprinted the first issue. Like I read the first issue when The Believer put it back out, like about, I'd say 15 years ago. I haven't yet I've seen snippets of 2 and 3. I've only read the first issue in its entirety. And the thing that came out like the fall of '88, it reads like something like Dan Harmon would have made like 10 years ago.
Yeah, because that is, I mean, it's become a part of the lore is that the Simpsons, for at least those 10 years that you're talking about, certainly here, these were some of the finest, if not the finest, comedy writers in the business. They all sort of conglomerated into the Simpsons. But I guess they recruited them from places like this. Army Man was one, but like Conan O'Brien wasn't from Army Man, right? I mean, he came in.
Conan O'Brien knew a lot of the Army Men guys because a lot of the Army Men guys worked at the Harvard Lampoon. The Harvard Lampoon is what ties in the SNL staff, Conan's guys, and Army Man together.
Right. And then it's sort of like, and then from there, those people went on to like work with Conan on his show, and then
George Meyer, after the whole news show didn't pan out, he took over not necessarily the news for like the best years they had on HBO.
Right.
Then he went to SNL. But of course, who also was at not necessarily the news? Greg Daniels and Conan O'Brien.
Not necessarily. That's a show that I miss. That was like, I don't know if people remember it that much anymore. I don't think it's a show that people, I don't really hear people talking about it, but it like predates like The Daily Show and all that stuff by at least a decade.
15 years, because you can see the first episode uncut on YouTube. Someone's put like the first year of episodes up.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I would want to look that up because I'm assuming that all that stuff's going to end up on HBO Max now. So
if they care, I mean,
if they were to care, that's true.
It's not necessarily television. Starring Ronald Reagan as the president.
Yeah, I think these are things that people just don't seem aware of anymore. I don't know how that fell out. You know, like I don't know what happened that made not necessarily the news fall into obscurity.
Well, it was a really shot on videos. It's a rough looking show. And it lasted 5 years on HBO, right in the time when HBO really didn't become HBO. Like right when they were ending, HBO was starting to like blow up. Because I think they were like 1982 to 85, or like they took a weird, like in between seasons 3 and 4 was it like a hiatus that lasted forever. Then it came back and did 2 more seasons and they were over. That's
a good point because of the HBO as we know it, their rise to become the powerhouse in terms of original programming made for HBO is not really something that took off until the 90s, I guess, right? Like. So back to this, back to Bart versus Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So let's see, what else can we say about this before we go into it? So what do you think of the episode overall? Do you think it's a good episode?
I think most everything Simpsons related before season 4, I'd say the end of season 4, it's quaint. It's like, oh, that's cute. That used to be a thing.
Right. Okay. So you find it quaint, essentially.
Yeah, I find it quaint, and it's more like I look more at the creative parts, just because that's the way my brain works. Like historically, because David Silverman was like this was one of his real first big episodes he directed, and now I mean the guy's the first Simpsons director to get an Oscar nomination for doing the Maggie Simpson short. I mean, he's it. He's like one of the rocks.
Well, it is well directed. I mean, you look at the episode where you can call it quaint now, but even with its quaintness, you look at it and you can appreciate some of the things that they were doing that were different, and that even now kind of stand out. That whole sequence when Bart's been kicked out and he wants to go back in, and he has that whole like dream sequence where
it's your fault I'm bald.
I'm sorry.
It's your fault I'm old.
I'm sorry. It's your fault I can't talk. I'm sorry.
It's your fault America has lost its way.
Also, you can tell the Harvard shit was so strong in there. I mean, Georgia O'Keeffe, Susan B. Anthony, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. I mean, just throwing all these beat references. You know what I love? My favorite reference in the whole thing, and it's like an ongoing joke in like those first years of The Simpsons. Whenever Homer's like just grooving in his car, it's the same song over and over again. It's "Get Dancing" by Discotheques and the Sixalettes.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I love that song, and then The Simpsons made me love that song because it's what I imagine stupid people have playing in their head whenever they have a moment alone.
Yeah, you're right. And I'd never heard that song before The Simpsons. That's the first time I heard it, because when I saw this episode, I was maybe 13 tops, and I watched that, and I had never heard that song. And it's the halftime show, and it's whatever group that is. Hooray for Everything is the group, right? And they're going to come out and sing, and they sing that as if it were one of their songs, but it's actually an old disco song.
Yeah. But even that, like the whole notion of halftime shows at Super Bowl being lame, that's dated too. No kid like under 21 is going to understand that joke at all, because every halftime show now is like the biggest thing in the world. I'm trying to think who they're particularly making fun of. I know the Mike Curb congregation used to do halftime shows like that throughout the 70s. It would be shit like that. Up with People. Because like the early days, like in the 60s, it was whatever was the local college, and they'd have them play stuff, and it'd always be like, because the games back then air like at 12 o'clock West Coast, 3 o'clock East Coast. So I mean, they had to play like things that aren't going to get anyone offended. I mean, they did Ella Fitzgerald, Andy Williams kind of music for a while, random marching bands from colleges, a salute to Mardi Gras, and a salute to the Motown in the 60s with Up With People. They're still around. Upwithpeople.org. You can go there right now and look at these idiots. Up with people, you meet them wherever you go.
Up with people. To your point, you're saying that this is a satire, and this is something that you see a lot, especially in these early seasons. But it is a satire of something that the writers, they grew up with that. This was funny for them, so it wasn't necessarily topical, but it was speaking to their generation. Which is what I said
would
from
have
the
been
beginning.
topical. I just thought about it. It would have been topical. Later, about 2 months later, they brought Up With People back. Their last appearance was at Super Bowl 25. That would have been like on ABC, maybe just 2 months after this episode aired.
Okay. But to your point about it saying that it's making fun of the concept of Super Bowl halftime shows being quote unquote lame, right?
You know what's even crazier about that? You know what made an event? Fox. Because they put The Simpsons, because they didn't have any sports rights, because their sports didn't really kick off to the late 90s. So in the early mid-90s, they decided to screw the halftime show, and they go, we got 2 big Super Sunday night shows, In Living Color and The Simpsons. We're going to extend them, make them go longer. We're going to put some Michael Jackson videos and shit on there. We're going to give them 2 hours at night just to steal attention away from the Super Bowl. And it worked. It blew that out of the water.
Then the Super Bowl themselves, they had to up their game.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember which was the first Super Bowl halftime show that was the game changer, right? The one where it's like, okay, that's it. This is your bar now, and this is what it has to be.
It would be Super Bowl 26, aired January 26, 1992. During the halftime, Fox aired a special live episode in living color alongside a highly rated episode of The Simpsons, stole 22 million viewers away. Never happened to Super Bowl ever. So the Super Bowl for 93, they brought in Michael Jackson at the Super Bowl, and they dumped more money than ever.
Right, and then at that point, it was like, look, you brought in Michael Jackson, who at that moment was the biggest pop star in the universe, right? So you brought him in, and he did a show that was at his level. And then, so now that's what you have to do. Like every year, you have to top that or equal that, right? So, and then from that point on, and that's why now, kids this is 30 years ago. So people now can't conceive of a time when the idea of the Super Bowl halftime show was not what it is today.
No one should have to suffer, especially our children. This is for the children of the world.
There's a place in your heart, and I
So what else do we have to say about this episode?
This actually was I think the only Simpsons episode to air on Thanksgiving Day itself, because this aired Thanksgiving night.
That's right. Yeah, the November 22nd.
Yeah.
Of 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was I don't know, in the production history, I believe that it's not that they were planning it, but they realized when they had decided to make the switch to Thursday nights, they realized that they would have an episode on Thursday night, and so decided to produce this. I think that's how that went.
Yeah, I'm also trying to remember, because I remember when they went to Thursday night because it was an effort to fuck with Cosby.
Yes.
I'm like, didn't 90210 come on like almost immediately after Simpsons ended? Because I know 90210 was that night too.
Right. No, it was. The thing is, Simpsons was lead. It was the lead-in for 90210, which they were really trying to push. That's the thing. I mean, people give the Simpsons credit for sort of boosting Fox's ratings, right? And they do deserve credit, obviously. But it was a combination of this new, like, hip, youthful lineup that they prepared, where you're talking about, Simpsons, you're talking about Living Color on Sundays, you're talking about 90210, and so it was all kind of part of the package, and it worked. I mean, 90210 was a big show.
I think people forget how big it was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was really huge. I mean, how long? I think it lasted for like a decade.
Hell, I remember the episode where they called me bad on. That was a big deal at my elementary school.
No, it was appointment television for a lot of teenagers, even if they don't want to admit it. I watched it on occasion. It wasn't like appointment television for me, but I did watch it on occasion. And it had an influence. Here's the thing that's a little bit funny about that. It was weird because 90210, so it starts at around the same time as The Simpsons second season. I don't know if immediately, but around the same time.
I'd say give or take a week.
Yeah, like it's around there. But their first season is in 1990. And there was a daytime soap that aired on Fox, like on channel, this is New York, would be Channel 5, yeah. So it aired on Fox. And this was a daytime thing. It was like Monday to Friday. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Crossing?
No, it's called Tribes.
Tribes? Oh, I thought it was Swan's Crossing. Most people say Swan's Crossing.
Yeah, no, I'm saying Tribes. For whatever reason, and here we go, confession. Because, TV kid watching ads for it, and they were really advertising it. And it came on in the afternoons. It would come on maybe around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So it was the sort of thing where I'd get home from middle school and plop myself in front of the TV and watch Tribes, like every day. I was upset. Like, I loved that shit. It was a soap opera. It's a fucking soap opera about high school kids that predates 90210. Because at the time that I was watching Tribes,
not by much.
Maybe not by much. Okay. Did you find
6 months? Yeah, 6 months. Because it literally was 95 episodes, March 5th, July 13th, 1990, then done. Never released on video. Yeah,
and I don't think I guess it didn't really, I don't know how well it did, and I know that I didn't see it through to the end. I know that at some point I stopped watching. I think because I traveled.
I know, I'm looking at the cast list. The lead girl from Night of the Creeps is in it, and that's about the only name I recognize.
Yeah, and right, that's right. I can't remember that detail. That's interesting. Yeah. I could have sworn it was all a bunch of unknowns. And I'm not sure where it was shot. I'm assuming it was out of California or something.
Shot on location. Only aired. Oh, here's the neat thing. Only aired in select Fox-owned station markets: Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Washington, Dallas, Houston, Boston. So therefore, most of the country didn't see it.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is. I guess it's a syndicated thing, but I guess they were testing it. I think if ratings had gone through the roof, it probably would have gone nationwide, maybe.
Well, apparently Agnes Nixon, she's the queen of the American soap opera. She loved it. She was a huge fan.
I was a fan of it too. It was, and I wasn't even embarrassed about it either. I was just like, I think I was the only person in my circle of friends and schoolmates who watched it, but no one made fun of me for watching it, so I guess it was all right. I guess it was acceptable that I was into that.
There was no Swan's Crossing.
Yeah, it was. Well, I don't even know so you didn't know about Tribes, and I don't even know about Swan's Crossing. Tell me about Swan's Crossing.
Swan's Crossing came out later in '92. It would be like when I was getting middle school, And it was like, oh, this is a show that all the girls I like watch that has all the hot girls on it. So I might as well get into it too. Like, it was Mira Sorvino's first thing, Sarah Michelle Gellar's first thing, Brittany Daniels' first thing. I mean, the talent was high.
I'm gonna look
Had
that
the
one up.
stupidest theme song. I know, I've seen the theme song played on YouTube. It was like catnip to like girls I knew. I'm like, oh, what do you want to watch? She's like, Swan's Crossing. I'm like, anything else? No. Okay.
And the thing is that people, well, it's not entirely factual to say that these things were entirely new, because they weren't. I mean, we had already had Degrassi Junior High before any of this. But there was kind of a boom in like teen soaps. That's a fact. Once 90210 exploded, that opened the doors for everything else. And, you know, it all comes back to that. 90210 was not the first teen soap, but it definitely was the one that sort of opened the floodgates.
Tribes, brought to you by LA Gear Fashion Athletic Footwear.
So, what do we think of Thanksgiving in general?
It's actually one of my favorite holidays because there's football, food, and a bunch of pissed off people seeking confrontation in front of each other. So,
Oh, of course. And here's the thing. I will have to say that for what it is, the Thanksgiving dinner of The Simpsons, like my favorite television Thanksgiving dinner is the one in Dexter.
Did you say you were thankful for me, Jonah?
I did not say I was thankful for you, because I'm not.
I am so thankful for you, Arthur.
Shut up, cunt.
But what I like about this particular Thanksgiving dinner is that in its own way, it portrays the reality that you just brought up about Thanksgiving. You have the Simpsons family. You see that it's a very uncomfortable thing. You have all these people coming over. You know, you've got Marge's family, and no one wants to be there. You know, that's the thing. Like it's a tense situation that's made worse when what happens, and like Bart, you know, fucks up Lisa's pretentious art project. The idea of conflict and everything is captured there. They put that in there. I'm guessing that's another George Meyer thing where he wanted to capture the uncomfortable feeling of Thanksgiving dinners.
Oh hell, Marge's mom's a little asshole the whole thing.
Right, she's terrible. She's like a horrible, horrible person from the moment she walks into the door.
At the risk of losing my voice, let me just say one more thing. I'm sorry I came.
And I think maybe that's unique because, like, I would imagine, because like I said, it has the basic structure, and at the end it's a heartwarming like ending and all that of like a Thanksgiving, of like a holiday special kind of thing. However, because you know you watch like a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving or Garfield's Thanksgiving or what else, they're always very nice, you know.
Yeah.
But in this one, they make a point of making the story about specific family-related conflict.
And it's about the kids reconciling after they parkour onto the roof.
Right, that's right. And that I think that that's the unique thing about this. I don't know if the concept of Thanksgiving being portrayed that way was new with this. I wouldn't know. But it seems like it would be. In a mainstream sense, I mean,
for a cartoon, I'd say, yeah, groundbreaking.
I mean, to portray the conflict, because, I mean, Thanksgiving in the mainstream, at least up until that point, was typically portrayed as a very good thing. You know, it's one, we all want this. We all want to we all want to get together with our family. And no one talks about the fact that, that there's this segment of the family that you can't fucking stand, that you're going to be forced to sit at a table and break bread with them, and you will get into an argument with them, and so on. So, I think this is the first time that the mainstream really tackled it. At least a very popular show did that, you know.
Well, the problem is that at the time, either went one way or another, which was haha jokes, Grandpa farted, or, you know, little Ricky can't read because the turkey didn't come out well done. It's either too serious or too funny. It never goes at the middle of, they're assholes. Let's just try to get through the day.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, where either it's too serious, either it's not a funny thing, or it's a totally funny thing. And then you have this one that's sort of in the middle. That's something that you see a lot of in these first two seasons, certainly, and maybe even into a little bit of the third, where there's that balance, that sort of like dramedy balance. You know what I mean? Where it's funny, but it's also sweet without being too like schmaltzy, but it sort of goes there a lot. And eventually they sort of moved away from that and kept things a lot funnier, I guess is the word. I mean, right?
Oh yeah.
In the Silver Dome, now ablaze with flashbulbs as hooray for everything leaves the field. Of course, a stadium's much too big for flash pictures to work, but nobody seems to care.
This episode is full of weird little things. Like, I'm a big fan about geography in terms of locations, even animation. And I was thinking about when the taxi drops off Mrs. Bouvier, Marge's mom, she goes into the front yard, and if you follow the next scene, she walks all the way around the house and beats her cane on the kitchen window so her daughters can see that she's there. Then does a full circle back around to the front of the house and waits and gives them shit when they open up the door.
Right. And when you say the geography, you mean like what exactly is the geography of this house?
Yeah, because in the hand animated years, the first 12 seasons, doors appear out of nowhere, closets disappear, there's extra openings, there's extra things. And I don't know, maybe it's a spatial thing with me, but it kind of makes me, I'd never noticed it when I was a kid. I get to adult years, and it just makes me like, okay, lay out a plan. It can't be that hard to have a plan. If this has to happen here, if this is here, this is here. You live in houses. You should know by now, as adult animators, how to draw a house. Then remember, oh yeah, it's because most of the people animating this work in a sweatshop. Now,
no, but like that. Actually, that's a very good point. And I even think there's YouTube videos and blogs about this. I'm sure about the fact that the actual geography of the Simpsons household. Well, it's kind of, they make it up as they go along. It doesn't really, that's a very good point. I've seen this somewhere, but in a lot of other pieces of entertainment, I do think that this is thought about, in terms of production design and whatever else. They do think about, let's say, like, let's use a sitcom as an example. They design, because they have to design sets. So obviously it has to be designed. There has to be a certain geography to it. Seinfeld's apartment or whatever, All in the House and All in the Family. There's an understanding of what that is. And, or you look at a sci-fi show, and one of the reasons why they have like blueprints of the Starship Enterprise is because these things exist. A production designer actually designed it and said, well, this is actually what the ship is. Like, this is where all the rooms are. So when we design the sets, we have to take all of that into account, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But for this, and I don't understand why they didn't say, okay, well, this is what the Simpsons house looks like. This is what it is. This is the first floor. This is the second floor. This is where the bedrooms are. Here's the kitchen. There's the basement. There's the backyard, blah, blah, blah. And it's already like mapped out. And then, you create sets, because that's ultimately what they're doing. They're animating it, but they still have to like create sets.
And you blow jokes, especially with that Marge's mom thing. You blow easy jokes. You could have her introduce being shitty to the taxi driver like she was, goes in the front house, insults her when shits on everyone, gets to the kitchen like, Marge, you blue-haired bastard, and just goes, takes her seat for kitchen dinner. I mean, you ruin a joke to make a visual gag that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then it's a hard cut to them all at the kitchen table.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, and it is strange, and they never really bothered. I don't know, did they eventually correct this? Because the thing is, one of the things that's funny, I don't own this, but I've looked it up, and a part of me would want to spend money on it, but at the same time, it's like, I couldn't possibly be that frivolous. But there's the Lego Simpsons house, right? And if you look at that thing, because it's inside and out, they designed the whole thing, but they had to design it. It doesn't make any. You look at it, and it's this mess. Everything's sort of clumped together because there's no geography. Like the three bedrooms are like clumped together, and nothing makes any sense in the Lego house, and that's because there's no blueprint of this. No one actually mapped it out. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, even for the attached garage, an attached garage doesn't exactly lay out like that. It would be closer toward the side or back of the house. I mean, that's the architecture nerd of me, but I've seen the Lego model you're talking about is based on the HD model for when the show went to HD. So I mean, they tried to fix it.
They must have. I mean, I don't think I've watched it since it went to HD, so I wouldn't even know that. But I mean, the look of the house hasn't changed at all. Like, at least the way, the facade, the way it looks from the outside, that's the house.
You remember when that lady won a replica of their house for guessing who killed Mr. Burns back in the day?
No.
Yeah, she was
No.
like some. I think she worked at AT&T or something, but she was just some like call center lady, and she looked like, "Yay, I won something." And then they showed the house was like in the back like section of Las Vegas. It was middle of nowhere, Nevada, and it was the most ugliest looking house. Where you realize that, hey, what works animation looks like shit in real life, and you could see her face like, "Yay, I have this now."
So wait, so it's a life-size house.
Yeah, it was part of a contest for viewers to call in like, who do you think shot Mr. Burns?
That's something, right? And if you find it, like send me I'm gonna put a link to that in the description. That's unbelievable. Like that they actually did like a full size. When you said replica, I assumed it was like a dollhouse kind of thing.
No, it's a house that people live in. I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
It's ugly as shit. It's a 2-story stucco house located on Red Bark Lane in Henderson, Nevada, in the South Valley Ranch community now because they built a neighborhood around it because they couldn't sell the house by itself.
But there's like theme parks, right, based around The Simpsons. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've been to Universal Studios in Orlando. I was there a couple of years ago.
Shit, I'm looking at the inside of this. They ruined these people's lives. This is horrible to dump on somebody.
You just won a life-size replica of the Simpsons house. Woo-hoo! Built by Kaufman and Broad. Congratulations.
They do have like theme parks, like
oh yeah.
I've only been to the one to Universal Studios, which is not, it's just this little section that has a bunch of Simpsons related shit. And then like you have the big ride, which is the Back to the Future ride, which has been like, refitted to be a Simpsons ride. The ride's a lot of fun and whatever, but there's no, like, I was hoping for like a replica of the house or some shit like that. But I'm pretty sure that exists somewhere.
Oh, it exists. And
in one of the theme parks.
In the theme parks, yeah. Some of the internals of this house, they've gutted it and refixed it around, look like a theme park ride. And I'm like, they shit all over these people. Barbara Howard, a 63-year-old retired factory worker from Richmond, Kentucky. She lived in an area so rural that Fox's dispatched limo for her couldn't get down the road to her home. Having been to Richmond, Kentucky, I believe that. Network flew her in her first time on a plane in her life with her 2 daughters and grandson. She gambled at little casinos and she thought the home was going to be near Las Vegas. It was not. He had to take her about 40 minutes out of the way to nearby Henderson.
So wait, and this house, is it like in the middle of nowhere literally, or is it like a neighborhood?
Well, since White Flight and expansion happened in Vegas, it's now considered part of the suburbs of Vegas. But back then it was in the middle of nowhere.
It was like the house in Arrested Development.
Yeah, it looks exactly like that.
It's just like basically just this house stuck in like a desert, and that's it. Like that, and that's where they're fucking living.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hooray for Everything invites you to join them in a salute to the greatest hemisphere on Earth. The Western Hemisphere, the dancingest hemisphere of all.
To wrap this up, what do we think of this episode? You said earlier on that it was quaint.
It's quaint. It doesn't even feel like The Simpsons anymore. That's why when people go, and it was only good for the first X amount of years, I'm like, nah, it got good. I'd say season 4 to season 9, and then sporadically after that. Some people who shit on The Simpsons, it's like, I get where you come from, and other people, it's like you're just shitting on it to shit on it.
But that is true too. I can imagine that part of it is also, things are going to change. How many showrunners has it had over the years? How many writers have come and have been ferried in and out of it over the years? And obviously, you're going to have this ebb and flow. And to your point, yeah, it sort of had growing pains, like any series, where the first season is extremely rough, second season's a little better, third season's a little better, and then as you're saying, in the fourth season, it already starts to really, really take off and get really good for X number of years, and then it begins to sort of taper off. But part of that also is that you as a viewer also start to kind of outgrow it, and other things start to come along that can do what it's doing and start doing it maybe better, And so that's it's a whole bunch of things. But I do think that a lot of people just shit on it because you're just going to shit on it, and a lot of people that are shitting on it probably haven't watched it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Like, one of the reasons why I'm going through it, going all the way back to the beginning, is because I want to see the evolution. I want to sort of trace that and kind of make my own little like investigation into how it evolved, when it hit its peak, and then when it started to go down. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And even in my case, it's going to be completely subjective, because there are other people who might be like, no, but it was still good in 1999, and it was still good in 2002. They might say that, and they might be right, but it's very subjective, right? I mean,
oh yeah, I mean, 99 was when it was starting to show cracks. 2002, I won't give you. But even then, like, the tone of the show changed. Like, back then, like season 2, even season 1, it's very much a kid's show that families can watch. Even though people had issues with, I went to the theme park one time. One kid had on the Free Nelson Mandela Bart Simpson. The other one had a I Hate Ford Bart Simpson. I mean, people forget how much of a monster of a pulp culture thing this was at the time.
No, it was huge. Of course, it was everywhere. And as you said, like, it was considered very edgy, blah, blah, blah. But when you sit down and actually watch it, this episode in particular, ultimately, is it edgy? Does it have a few gritty jokes here and there? It definitely does. But it's still family entertainment. I mean, it's still a story about, Bart and Lisa having a problem and resolving it. And it has like a happy ending, a heartwarming ending, a nice family unity message.
Yeah, it's not Homer tripping balls and hanging out with Johnny Cash as a coyote.
Right. It doesn't, it's still pretty like, this is a nice show. This is nice. This is ultimately, there's a couple of things that are quote unquote adult. There's references that kids don't get, but the message is something appropriate for a family audience. The whole thing is still appropriate for a family audience. And you see that a lot here. I guess the show got edgier, even if it never got it never went full South Park, or because like these are the things that came out and started to compete with it. South Park, eventually Family Guy, and whatever else.
Yeah, I could watch season 4 with like my family whenever, but when that was airing, like the Camp Krusty episodes when all that shit went crazy. And then what I'd watch in my room would be Beavis and Butthead and Liquid Television. Yeah.
Right, that's really edgy stuff, And you look at The Simpsons, and it's still, and it was, and I guess it must still be. I don't watch new ones, but it must still basically be family entertainment when compared to anything else.
Well, anymore, it's a media conglomerate, so it runs the gamut. One episode's about Marge selling CBD and hemp-related products and stuff like that. The other episode is about Lisa having religious issues. This episode they just did with Pete Holmes, the guy from Crashing, it was a 2-parter. It was the first religious episode with Lisa Simpson that didn't feel hokey or shitty in like decades.
Okay, so you're basically attesting that it's a current episode. It's from the current season.
Yeah, it aired about a month ago.
And would you say it's good?
I'd say it's great for recent Simpsons, good for overall.
So that means that there are diamonds in the rough. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't be. I would imagine that there would have to be, because the show is still around. If it were really that terrible, it would have been canceled years ago.
I never missed a Simpsons episode for 18 years where I realized that appointment television is stupid. Right now, even though I still love The Simpsons, watch The Simpsons, I don't ever watch any of them live. And I might enjoy 4 or 5 episodes a season for the last 7-8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But those 4 or 5 are great and hold up. The other 15, not so much.
Well, I mean, so there has been a dip in quality. I guess that's undeniable. There was a time when a full season of the show, you're talking at least 95% of that, you're talking quality stuff.
If not 100. Season 5
if not 100, right.
Season 5's 100.
Right. And with my friend Dan Lebowski, we talked about, he told me that the season, I don't know which season this would have been, I don't keep track that way, but I guess it would be the 96 or 97 season. So I guess, it would be season 5 or season 6, which he said that he had recently gone through. And he was basically saying that every single episode was amazing. So
yeah, that would be about season 5, season 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it would basically be that. Yeah. This was a really good talk. I'm going to have you back in a few weeks for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That'll be a fun one to talk about. So I want to thank you for coming on here and talking The Simpsons with me. This has been a great talk and some mind-blowing revelations. So thanks a lot for participating. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
I would love to plug my website. That's Anderson Vision, AndersonVision.com, www.andersonvision.com, home of the Whopper. We're currently in a litigation with Burger King. I think I could beat them in a fair fight, so I can call my site Home of the Whopper, just because Happiest Place on Earth was already taken, and Disney would beat the shit out of me without blinking an eye.
And what can people hope to find on your website?
At Anderson Vision, we tackle all sorts of random pop culture stuff. And mostly on social media, we stick to the dark Discord channels, chat servers, private stuff, because we're not trying to change you. We don't want you to be better people. We just want your data so we can sell it to our marketing overlords. We're not trying to shame you. We're not trying to make you feel bad for liking Joe Bob Briggs or anyone else. We just want your sweet, precious data.
Well, that's great. I'm gonna make sure to add that link to the description, so you guys should check that out. And thanks again, Troy, for joining. And this is great. I'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye-bye. So that's it for this week's installment of the Simpsons Countdown. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please give us a like. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. If you have a minute, a brief review might actually help boost the podcast's profile on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And if it isn't too much trouble, please do share this with all your friends, both virtual and actual, on social media. Your support by spreading the word is much appreciated. I recommend also you keep track of Troy on his website, AndersonVision.com, and I'll be providing a helpful link in the description for this episode. The website provides no bullshit reviews and pop culture commentary, so go ahead and bookmark it because it's worth your time. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back next Thursday evening to talk about Bart the Daredevil, the perennial classic in which Bart becomes adept at pulling stunts on his skateboard and plans to leap over Springfield Gorge. If you remember any episode from the show's first 2 years, it's almost certain you remember this one. My good friend and fellow Bolivian musician, Petrus, will be along for the ride. I hope you'll join us. Until then, stay safe out there and continue observing your biosafety and social distancing protocols because, whether your area is opening up or not, we're not quite through this thing. And we need everyone to do their part keeping themselves and everyone else healthy. And we'll get through this in due time. Thank you for listening. See you next week.